Hello, it's good to be back. I haven't seen you guys in 3 or 4 weeks. Feels like forever. You guys had a show without me last week.
We did.
Yeah, it sucked. Clearly, you were missing the star of the show, eh? But
Of course, you would say that.
you know,
Welcome back, George.
well, thank you.
Yeah,
Tell
how
us
were
a
your
bit about,
travels?
Well, as you can see, I came bearing gifts, but more of that later. But I'll tell you what, things are moving in Africa. Everybody else is going forward. And we are the only people that are, well, and South Africa, that are determined to regress. Anyway, it's good to be back in the usual place, usual faces, talking about things that we don't know anything about. And really, you ought not take us very seriously because we're just three guys sitting in a bar trying to make sense of the world. What are we drinking?
Well, he's wearing yellow socks.
And you're wearing yellow pants?
No,
We might
This
actually
is-
be allocated a
this is
party.
not yellow, but that's yellow.
What color is that?
What do you think?
Yellow.
Yellow.
So mustard, and that's yellow.
Oh, mustard is a color.
Yeah.
I thought that was something that you added to your food.
It's just like you think salmon is a color.
It is. a
Okay.
colour. That's yellow. But well done.
You got a red
Summer.
shirt. Yeah. Anyway, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm sure you can actually speak to this. This is Ugandan coffee.
Yep.
Mid dark roast. What do you think? Have you tried it?
I haven't tried it.
Well, thank you very much, George. It's lovely.
They actually grow quite a lot of coffee in Uganda, but they don't only grow coffee; they also make interesting things. So this is called Uganda Waraji.
I'm sure they're well known for their coffee and not for their whatever that is.
This is
Distilled water.
This is their traditional drink, banana liqueur, made from.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, well, it's made from plantain. It's a bit like the equivalent of
It smells like gin though.
like cachasu. Yeah, it's a gin. But so they make, like, every rural home makes their own of this stuff. But what they've done, what I found very interesting, is they've commercialized it. You can buy this in duty free at the airport.
Oh, okay.
We can't say the same place. So I don't think we should have more than one shot of it.
Well, the alcohol content is 40%.
Same as whiskey.
Oh,
It's actually quite smooth, eh?
Yeah, it is quite smooth for a gin. Yeah, it's not bad.
Not bad
It's
at all.
not bad.
Maybe if I go there again, I'll bring some more.
A case.
But
And is it value for money? Is it like on the
yeah, I mean, it's everybody can afford this.
fantastic?
It's not
less
expensive.
than 20 cents.
No.
So not everybody can afford it.
Okay, Tinashe, when it comes to alcohol, can you sit there, smile, and talk about your mustard or mayonnaise pants or whatever color they are?
Okay.
And this has my totem on it, so I like it already.
Also very interesting is they're manufacturing rum. They've got lots of sugarcane. Like
So do we, but we don't make any rum.
we have more sugarcane than them. But they and we just export sugar. But they actually produce rum, which they also export.
So of interest, do they drink more alcohol than us per capita?
Interestingly, they, depending on which ranking you read, they are between number 3 and number 8 highest alcohol consuming nation per capita in the world.
In the world. Okay, so that might explain it.
No, I think it's got
See, I've got something to say.
No, well, okay, yeah, well done. But you didn't make it about economics, didn't you?
No, I don't think. I think it speaks more to how easy it is to industrialize than in that part of the world than here. Because I
When you're
suspect,
alcoholics.
I suspect, for example, and I'm speculating here that it's not necessarily the case that because Cuba is the world's premier manufacturer of fine cigars, that their per capita consumption of the same would be number one.
True.
You know, so
In fact, our per capita consumption of tobacco is one of the lowest in the world, but our production is one of the highest.
And that's because our soils are amenable to the production
that's
of
not the reason.
great tobacco.
You've been in the tobacco industry, you know this. It's really because of our flavor. So you can't make a cigarette out of Zimbabwean or just Zimbabwean tobacco.
No, it'll be a very nice cigarette,
Actually,
but it'll be a very expensive one.
but
Yeah.
so one of the fun facts about cigarettes is
And I
that
thought you were gonna speak to Cuba and why they're.
Okay, how do we even start off in a rabbit hole?
That's what happens when you come.
yes,
See, we're actually well behaved when he's
Anyway,
okay,
looking at this week in history, quite a few interesting things have happened, and it makes you think that maybe we're about to get a price policy change, because in 2007, the Joint Operations Command, a national security think tank made up of army, police, prisons, and CIO chiefs, reportedly took over the duties of the cabinet task force on price monitoring. In the same year, this week in the same year, more than 23,000 people were arrested for flouting price controls. In 2008, in the same week, RBZ suspended inter-account transfers and directed all transactions to be made through checks and debit cards.
those are fun times.
In 2011, same week, government finalized the importation of coins and new banknotes from the US to alleviate change problems and soiled notes that have affected consumers in their transactions.
we have lots of those.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. Or we haven't had price controls, so maybe we've learned from that dark period.
That's one way of looking at it. But if you actually think about the extent to which there's an import component in everything, and we have a controlled exchange rate, we basically have an implicit price control of almost everything, because almost everything has an import component.
So we haven't learned.
No,
But we don't have shortages this time around.
no, we don't have shortages. We've definitely done much better in that regard. And to be fair, actually, and I'm sure we had a bit of a conversation about this in the last episode. Over the last 6 to 8 weeks, we've had some price stability. The exchange rate hasn't really moved. The debate really is this just is this a permanent change in direction, or it's just a temporary lull, and sooner or later the rate is going to start running away again.
Well, we learned that the government is hard at work preventing the rate to run away. They're going to create some reserves, because now mining companies must pay their royalties in minerals. Will that help?
You had a lot to say about it. Let's hear what you think.
I don't know that it will help. I mean,
This drum's nice, eh?
I don't know. I'm not yet sold. Maybe I'll have an opinion after a glass or two.
Sorry. Minerals reserves.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's interesting. It's another economic policy innovation, if we're generous. But let's start from the basics. Do we actually, as a country, have foreign currency reserves to speak of that we report on a regular basis? When was the last time we actually
we do.
We've got about
150 million, which is about 8 or 9 days import cover.
where are you getting this number?
World Bank. I think it's World Bank.
We used to actually
What
publish.
do you need to do? Well, you can look at the Reserve Bank accounts, right? Because they do publish on a monthly basis. And the last they published was July, and we've got negative reserves.
So
To the tune of, I think it's 2 or 3 billion US dollars negative reserves.
Okay, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, because you've got an interesting way of reading those numbers. But okay.
No,
But
I'm just reading
let's stick to the point. So anyway, we agree. Small or negative reserves. We don't have reserves. We don't have any real reserves to talk about. So government says we're going to take the minerals.
So for me, my first concern is in terms of just the ordinary course of business, the normal way that we're supposed to be accumulating reserves, we don't seem to have. So why are we complicating our lives by then saying we want to start accumulating these reserves, but we're going to do it in a way that's unconventional? We're going to collect it in the form of platinum, in the form of all the as ore. You know,
No, they said it's finished product.
It's finished product.
Yeah,
well,
so-
we
so-
don't
so
have
in
a
whatever
platinum.
in whatever form that product is exported. That's the form
Yes,
the
so we
government will
don't export platinum, refined platinum. We don't have a platinum refinery.
take. But we export matte.
Yeah,
which
so
is semi-processed.
Yeah,
yes,
which is
which is a bunch
No, it's
of
not a-
dirt and it's a concentrate. It's concentrated
concentrated
ore,
Yes.
yeah.
right? So yeah, we want to build warehouses and basically keep this concentrate instead of US dollars in an account. Or
But maybe
I
Why?
think that the fundamental question that you guys are not asking or should be asking, and where the conversation should go, is if we don't have any reserves, what's backing our Zim dollars? I mean, let's look at China because we.
Okay, sorry,
we-
are you starting a new discussion?
No,
Are
I'm
you
not.
completely
But I'm
different
actually I'm trying to contextualize it for you so that you make the logical conclusion that this is just a red herring and we should just move on. They tend to do this to divert our attention on the core issue, and I'll tell you what the core issue is. But back to we're starting to collect royalties, and that will go to central bank as a form of reserve. So the question we should ask ourselves is, right now, what is backing our currency? There's absolutely nothing. So do we think that 24 million US dollars in a year will then back our Zim dollars? Not a chance in hell. But what it shows us is they're trying to divert our attention because we've actually been exporting more, but money that's going through the auction has actually reduced to about 11 million. And the question we should ask is, where is the balance going? Because we used to collect about 40 million. We should be, the auction used to
Allocate,
distribute
you
about,
mean.
Yeah.
we used to
But-
allocate about 40 million.
But
And I
what-
think that's the core issue we should be discussing. But for whatever reason, we've diverted that discussion to something that really is irrelevant.
I'm going to push back. Firstly, I don't think it makes sense to say that the local currency, for all its challenges, is backed by nothing.
What's it backed by?
It's backed by the faith and confidence of the government, right? Whatever that's worth. It's not nothing, and there's a reason why
No,
there's value
it's
to the Zim
nothing.
dollar.
Please stick to monetary economics.
No. The Zim dollar today has value, right? It's not backed by currency or gold, or there are no reserves, but there is the country is actually an ongoing is a going concern,
I
and
didn't say it's not a currency.
yeah,
Okay, so if you look at China, right? China decides to have a fixed exchange rate.
it's got a managed exchange rate.
Well, it's
Okay.
It's
Okay.
been managed from what to what?
Okay.
It's fixed. It's got a fixed exchange rate, but it comes with a consequence. And the consequence is you must have the highest reserves to back that fixed currency policy. Would you agree that that's what's backing the Chinese currency? That they actually have dollars so they can protect their currency. If there's a run in their currency, they can actually show up.
So if that's
with
what,
their currency.
if that's your question, we are backing our currency with legislation.
Piece of paper.
Yes.
No wonder we've now cash dollarized, right? Because actually, why would a foreigner hold Zim dollars? You should ask that question. Why would a foreigner? Because a foreigner in China, a foreigner is willing to hold the yuan primarily because they think, oh, look at their reserves. If anything should go bad, I can exchange my yuan. The government of China has said, you know what, we're willing to exchange at this particular rate. And look at our reserves. We have enough to exchange whatever you're bringing in the
But
country.
okay, so I think that
And almost every country goes by that rule.
I think people have faith and confidence in the yuan.
Just out
not
of
just
interest. Just out of interest. We're talking Ugandan things. Uganda, a little country, middle of Africa. The paratroopers can't find a stadium.
Well, we have the similar problem.
No, our paratroopers can find the stadium.
No,
But anyway,
they can't.
Uganda has 3.6 billion.
in reserves.
And do you know what you're saying
just
with
discipline.
reserves? No, just think about it. Do you know what you're saying with reserves? And usually they use import cover. right? They will say 6 months, or Russia had 2 years import cover. They're saying, actually, if you come into our country and you exchange your currency with our currency, we guarantee that at any time, at any point, even if we do not export a single cent, we guarantee that we can cover your imports, or we can cover your cash
exit,
out
yeah.
for the next 6 months.
Which is about the cover that Uganda has.
Yeah,
Ethiopia is higher, and they're at war.
exactly. Because that's a critical principle of economics. And the reason why the Chinese have the highest reserves is because they've gone one step further, and they say, we're going to fix our exchange rate. So rather than have it as a floating exchange rate where you don't need as much in reserves, because you're like, you know what, whatever the going price is, we're going to fix it. But because we've got a fixed exchange rate, there are consequences to it. And we're going to keep our reserves. And guess where we're keeping our reserves?
In America.
In America. You know why they keep their reserves in America? Besides the obvious point that it's US dollars, people are investing in US dollars, so they would rather. The obvious one, because Germany, that's exactly what Germany did after World War II. They actually, their gold was
At Fort Knox in New York, yeah.
It's because you've got an independent person accounting for your reserves. Because right now we had a similar problem, right? Where George says, I think they've got reserves. And we're like, no, they don't. And everybody is questioning whether or not the RBZ has reserves. But if the reserves were at the South African Reserve Bank or at the Fed, then an independent individual could actually look at the reserves and say, yeah, it is what it is, whether we like the government or not. You know, and for the longest, and I think it was GNU, and after the GNU, even Chinamasa was sober enough to understand that keeping SDRs at the IMF is actually helpful, because then people can look at the SDRs at the IMF and say, oh, yeah, this is what Zimbabwe has, for better or worse.
This is a good place for us to take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk about SDRs, because
We're getting more.
It turns out we're getting more. What
More
did we do
manna
the last
from
one?
heaven.
Anyway, give us a couple of minutes. Tinashe needs to powder his nose. We'll be
Okay.
back in a couple of minutes.
Zvakanaka aiwa zvakanaka aiwa sowirouya kuzorerutsa ndima aiwa ichareruka aiwa pakuvira kwezuva kumira mbando rema kutomira pakaoma kumira mbando rema kutomira pakaoma zvakanaka aiwa zvakanaka aiwa ndakagara ndagutsa auchamira wega hapachina chinokunetsa kana basa wariketsa hapachina chinogumutsa kana basa wariketsa zvakanaka aiwa zvakanaka aiwa sowirouya kuzorerutsa ndima aiwa ichareruka aiwa pakuvira kwezuva kumira mbando rema kutomira pakaoma kumira mbando rema kutomira pakaoma zvakanaka aiwa zvakanaka
Welcome back. You guys feeling refreshed?
100%.
Topped up your coffee? Do you like this coffee?
Actually, I do. It's lovely. Thank you very much.
No, welcome. And the rum?
Yeah, I much prefer the gin to the rum. I'm impressed with it for something that's supposed to be kachasu. It's quite good.
Well, it actually does say extra quality gold seal.
Okay, you obviously
Finest quality.
you obviously haven't read many bottles of cheap liquor, have you?
I doubt that kachasu comes as extra quality.
If it was packed in one of those bottles, if it was packed in a bottle,
I doubt very much that you'll come across a bottle of legitimate champagne or cognac that says extra quality.
On the other hand, if you go and buy a bottle of what is now known as Tumbwa, around
What's
town-
Tumbwa?
Oh, you've got a lot to learn, my friend. But anyway, suffice to say, there's alcohol for every price point in Zim.
Yeah, we've said this before. Social education, right?
Yes.
And healthcare.
And okay, yeah.
But that bottle will be labeled something along the lines of best quality, finest quality. Anyway, before we went to the break, we were talking about, Tinashe had touched on SDRs. And it turns out that there's more on the way. The IMF is about to dish out another round of special drawing rights to countries that are having balance of payment problems and food security issues.
Yeah, it's basically a prize for being poor and having food insecurity.
Or a recognition of what's happening in Ukraine.
Well, if it was about what's happening in Ukraine, then it would be dished out to everybody.
I mean, ostensibly.
Well, suffice to say, with or without Ukraine, we tick the boxes.
Do we have a balance of payment problem? 'Cause
No,
for the
no,
last,
no,
for the last
no,
2-3 years, we said we didn't have.
Not us, not us. All our foreign obligations are paid up. And we've got piles and piles of reserves, right?
Yeah. I think now that it's convenient for us to get IMF SDRs, I'm pretty sure we'll start seeing the numbers coming out. The legacy debt and all sorts of debt that is due and payable that we haven't paid.
Well, the number's not awfully huge. It looks like we'll get around $450 million worth. It'll make a slight difference, but it's not going to change the world for us.
You mean the difference between 0 and 450?
Yeah, but it's
Come on, George.
it's a month's imports at the rate.
No. It won't make a big impact in our economy, but it's certainly something.
Yeah. I mean, it's money for free, right?
Yeah, precisely. I will have it.
But
I think most of it will be absorbed by the higher prices we're going to be paying for a bunch of things that we import.
Food, yeah.
So I think George is spot on to make the case that it's not going to move the needle. It's definitely
I'm not
much
saying
better
it's-
than zero.
Because remember, you have to apply for it,
Mhm.
right? And I'm saying that looking at just purely our balance of payment, we don't qualify. But I'm sure that the numbers will be tweaked to ensure that we do have a balance of payment problem, so that we qualify for this 400 million.
Well, anyway,
That's all I'm saying.
my question. I don't know what's happened to you guys between seasons. You've just become completely ungovernable.
We were getting on just fine when you were away.
So the whole show was one massive rabbit hole.
That's true.
Anyway, we previously got 900 million of these.
What's wrong with rabbit holes?
Can we stay focused? What did we do with the other 900 million?
I think a third we spent it in 2021.
On what?
A lot of it went into agriculture, COVID, imports, transport infrastructure.
What
And then-
transport infrastructure? Oh, the bike
Infrastructure,
road.
yeah, the roads. I think we paid 89 million. Oh no, was it 90 million? Anyway, I forget the actual details, but we spent on that. And then 250 was supposed to stay at the central bank as reserve, contingent reserves. But I'm sure we've been running down those contingent reserves.
How can you be
especially
sure? Have you
from
seen any
the last
numbers?
two. No, we haven't seen any numbers, but we can sort of tell. Just like we can tell that we're exporting, but the forex auction has only been issuing out
Okay.
11.
Rabbit hole. So 250 was supposed to be at the central bank. It
250
may or
was
may not
supposed
be
to.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
the rest
which
was
would be about 400 or 500 million.
500 million was about less than 300 million. Would have gone to SMEs. There were a number of guarantees that we issued and that we actually offered. I think tourism, there was another industry where we issued our cash. There was some sort of agriculture financing. So that's how we spent it. But what I know is we spent the bulk of it, and a third was supposed to be at the central bank.
So if you were Mtuli and you got this 450 coming, what did you do with it?
The same thing I'd have done with the 900 from 2001, I think, pay off.
2021.
No, he means initially when we started having SDRs, right?
Yeah, 2021. Sorry, just pay foreign creditors.
So just pay foreign creditors and hope they'll give us more.
Yeah, I don't think that's a plan.
Well, look,
What did you do?
Build reserves. Like, our biggest problem right now is our currency is not backed by anything. So it's exposed to the vagaries. And what I would do, personally, I would then build, that's the starting point for my currency board. I would use that as the starting point for my currency board and ensure that we actually have a currency that is supported by real reserves. If I can't have a currency board, then I would actually put it as reserves because it will go a very long way, especially if you're trying to stabilize the currency. It will go a very long way. Yes, it's less than a month, but it's a start. It's actually a very good start at building reserves.
Speaking of currency, we're seeing a convergence between parallel market and official exchange rate to a point where the premium is not so scary. It's not currently very scary. Is this not a moment for currency reform?
If you track since 2019, February 2019, when you introduced the Zim dollar, and you track the parallel market rate since then, we always have these convergence points. Over the last 4 years, I think it has happened maybe 3 or 4 times, right? If you track it, you see where it actually converges, or it's less than 20%, and then it increases again. I think this is another moment.
But isn't it a moment? It might have, these moments might recur several times, but isn't it a good time to reform?
To make the best of the moment.
Yes.
Yeah, to make the best of the moment is that the real rate? So your argument is, let's make the best of the moment, but there's latent pressure because what has brought the convergence is because somebody was not paid. So eventually when you pay that somebody, let's actually first of all get the real rate, right? Let markets be, let everybody be paid and let the markets be. Then once we know what that rate is and the auction, we get rid of the auction. Totally.
But why are you so excited about paying people? We've got a lot of other people we haven't paid. So
these are people who actually delivered something.
Do you think the foreigners who gave us 20 billion didn't deliver anything?
No, there's a lot of other people that haven't been paid.
Okay,
so
fair
these,
enough.
these guys can join. These guys
Can join the long queue.
They can join the long queue, but at this moment, we can actually reform the currency.
You're creating a moral hazard, but I hear you.
Yeah. So
We're creating it now.
It's always been there.
I mean, ask KFW that lent money to Zisco in 1984 or something. If the moral hazard has just recently been created.
Look, I think George makes a valid point. We've seen a stable currency for the last 6 to 8 weeks. It's a fantastic opportunity to build on that stability and take further steps to build back the faith and confidence which has been eroded. And I think the perfect way to do this would be to actually let the rates converge, allow the auction to legitimately be an auction. And then instead of...
get rid of the auction. I would say it's a perfect opportunity to actually get rid of the auction.
But even if that's...
I would actually say that it's
would be tantamount to some admission of failure. Let it actually work as an auction.
No, I would actually say
it's fundamentally flawed.
We actually need to use this moment to get away from a dual currency system to a monocurrency system that works. And I think that monocurrency system is going to work either through Tinashe's currency board or through a formal dollarization. Anything else is a fudge.
I agree.
No, I think Zim dollars can work if we float them.
Yes, but as a monocurrency.
It can't work. Okay, so do you know any country in the world where you float a currency without any reserves that can survive or that has survived?
I can't think of any examples.
Realistic?
I can't think of any examples. Exactly. But I think that I can say with very high conviction that a scenario where you have this huge parallel market where in terms of, when I say huge, I mean the volume of transactions there is quite high. And then you have a formal system, right? I think, notwithstanding whether we have reserves or not, we are better off if the market is comfortable trading through banks openly.
So
Yes,
just
yes,
get rid of them.
but we say, okay, we've got a moment to do the correct thing.
Yes, and that would be a step in the right direction.
But let's start with what the correct thing would be. And the correct thing is to move away from this dual currency, I think. Have a mono currency. If you're going to have a Zim dollar, then it must be under a currency board.
Currency board.
Or you formally dollarize it in the broad sense, whether you dollarize using rands or euros or whatever. But we literally become part of the domestic monetary system of another country.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we have now with the informal dollarization, we're using a currency, and we learned this the last time around, right? You use a currency without becoming part of the domestic monetary system of the owner of the currency. You create problems because
You start creating your own money.
we're creating money here that is not backed by anything. So we need
And
to.
we're actually in a worse position now because with the cash dollarization, this is what we're realizing, is that demand has just left us. There's no aggregate demand anymore, and the economy has contracted quite severely.
But
And Zimmer is not getting any revenue.
But if it was a purely cash dollarization, I'd be worried about growth, but I wouldn't be worried about a collapse down the line because we wouldn't create money.
Absolutely.
But because
Absolutely.
we've informally dollarized, including the banking system, we are creating money that is just floating in the air.
Yeah, we're creating monetary assets, and we are putting a dollar sign to those monetary assets when it's not actually US dollars. And that's creating a bigger problem.
So we need to go to the Fed or to the European Central Bank or to the South African Reserve Bank or someone and say, please can we use your money and please can we clear through you? So we don't
And
have this.
here are our SDRs. These are our initial reserves.
Look, I think these are all good ideas, but how realistic, are such big steps in the context of where we're coming
not
from?
known for being realistic. I wouldn't worry about that. But we are, it's a fancy in our imagination because we actually want something good out of Zimbabwe. And we're saying this is an opportunity again where we can take the moment and actually create something that is more sustainable and not create 5 currencies within a 4-year
years.
period. Whether they take it or not, doesn't really
Touch
bother
wood.
us. Exactly. So, but if you want to be realistic, this is what I would do, is just keep reserves, but don't keep the reserves at the central bank. Keep them at the IMF. Let people see them and think, oh, okay, that's how Zim is performing. Those are the reserves. And then you build on it. So from 400 or whatever it is, you then build over a period of time. But that's if you're trying to be realistic. That's still not going to grow the economy. But if you really want to change course, what you need is a currency board. You still have your Zim dollar, but your Zim dollar is now fully backed by reserves. And those reserves are being accounted elsewhere, outside of Zimbabwe. The minute you do that, because if you think about it, most of our, the currency that moves around Zimbabwe, you don't necessarily need US dollars. And if you think about it, if it's in the formal banking system, those are just credits and debits. There's not hardcore cash that you need. But now with the formal dollarization, that at least allows you to move these debits and credits without necessarily requiring the hardcore cash. With currency board, it actually allows you to not even think about the US dollars, to only think about the US dollars when you're importing. And if you think about our economy, it's a very small percentage of our economy that thinks about importing. A very small, significant portion of our economy. Your mother or your grandmother shouldn't worry about US dollars if you think about it.
She shouldn't.
She shouldn't.
And in a normal country, she doesn't. In a normal country, we'd be sitting there drinking waraji, and our wives would be making fried plantain chips for us.
Shouldn't. Even industrialists, and I'm also not sure why industrialists are not pushing hard for a currency board, because it just allows everybody to start thinking about production. And that's what we need to be talking about.
Okay,
Production,
but we need to go for a
production.
break now.
Okay.
And you need to get down from your soapbox. Give us a couple of minutes. We'll be right back.
Dairara mohiri sarudzo daidama kore mazana mana sawira huya timborangana timboronga tichine mukana handirambe ishe ninobvuma kana mati yangu nguva yakwana sawira huya timborangana timboronga tichine mukana daita isiva ramangwana taingovhunza ndewani mukana dainda isiva ramangwana taingovhunza nderani jana sawira uya timborangana timboronga tichine mukana sawira uya timborangana timboronga tichine mukana daita isiva ramangwana taingovhunza ndewani mukana dainda isiva ramangwana taingovhunza nderani jana sawira uya timborangana timboronga tichine mukana.
So, welcome back. Quite a lot's been happening in the global economy, right? You've got global inflation on the rise. You've got interest rates all around the world going up. You've got this war in Ukraine. And closer to home, you've got the South African economy in turmoil, right? Not no power, but
They've got power issues.
they've got power issues.
Energy crisis.
Every day, some union or other wants to go on strike.
Kosatu has left the ANC alliance, the tripartite.
They've got issues. But they are half of Africa's GDP. And you combine with...
No, they're not that big.
That's actually part of the problem. If you look at over the last decade, they've moved down from 450 billion to around 320 billion GDP. Nigeria is now close to $500 billion.
Okay,
Egypt is again $500 billion. So they're not a significant player as they used to be. Yeah.
But certainly they're a major player in our part of the world. For sure.
Absolutely.
And our part of the world relies on South Africa.
They employ more people. They employ more Zimbabweans
than are employed in Zimbabwe.
Than those that are employed in Zimbabwe. So
we rely on them for finished goods. We rely on them.
40% of our imports and exports, South Africa.
So what does this mean?
So I actually think they're a fantastic example of the middle road, right? They are not exactly...
Middle between what and what?
So they're not exactly a socialist communist state by any stretch of the imagination, but they are not a free market capitalist state. They don't have at will employment. They have labor laws that are very conservative and rigid, that make it difficult to hire and fire. So they're not dynamic in that space. And I think that's one of the things that has held them back in terms of growth. When you look at their power issues, it's because they have a large public sector. ESCOM is a government-owned utility. It's not, the electricity is not liberalized. It is not run by the private sector. For the longest time, they owned a national airline that was hemorrhaging them. They only, released it after kicking and screaming, for decades. And that's why they haven't enjoyed the kind of growth that they should have, and that's why they have these kind of problems, because they haven't liberalized, they haven't adopted a more aggressive free market capitalism model.
So in other words, they've made all the same mistakes we have.
No. I mean, our mistakes are epic.
They're just starting. I think they're just starting.
But you know, they
They have a potential to get to our mistakes because they're just starting. But in this energy crisis, I think you're taking it for granted. I don't think Zimbabwe actually had the extent of an energy crisis that South Africa is having. And
Tinashe, do you know that there was a day a couple of weeks ago where Wange didn't produce a single watt of electricity?
yeah, okay, so let me contextualize. So we don't rely on our industry and our livelihoods do not rely on energy as much as South Africa does. So if, for example, the US should go for a day without electricity, it has a significant impact on their GDP because their entire lives are relying on energy.
because they legitimately live in the 21st century.
And it turns out in Zim, I think, what, about 50% or just less than 50% of our households have electricity. So that electricity goes in Zimbabwe. Well, I think there's half the population that
Doesn't
doesn't
indifferent.
notice. It's indifferent. And the economic activity is not affected in any way. But when you look at South Africa, 90% of the economy relies on ESCOM, relies on electricity. And they haven't found alternatives like we have, where you have your generator, you have your solar. They're not yet there. And mentally, I don't think they're there. And I saw a report that they need to expand or reinvest. I think it's like 75%. They need to increase their capacity over 75%. So they've got real problem. Where I actually agree with you is that they've got real solutions, real options that Zimbabwe doesn't have, for example, that they have. And they, for whatever reason, they haven't gone that route, which is privatization, for example. So let's suppose you want to stick with the state ESCOM, but they've got an opportunity for fracking. Did you know this? That they've got, I think, the highest gas in Africa.
Really?
Yeah, they could frack tomorrow, but the legislation
Doesn't allow.
prohibits. They've got uranium. They can go nuclear, and they've had nuclear in the past.
No, we have
Right.
uranium too.
Yeah, but then they've done this before. It's nothing new.
I mean, we have every mineral under the sun. We're a bad example.
but they're not. So this is where I agree with you that actually their problem is a simple one. It's more a principal problem. That if they go free market and say, you know what, as ESCOM, we're going to keep it because for whatever reasons. I mean, I didn't know this, that the ANC actually deploys cadres in state enterprises. Like there's an entire system.
I don't know why you guys are saying that they're different from Zim, but
No, I didn't say they're different from Zim. I said they.
Oh, you said they're different from.
It's Zimbabwe in the 90s. Let's say that. They're not yet hyperinflationary because actually their central bank is one of the best run in the world.
So you know that fun fact, the South African Reserve Bank,
Has private shareholders.
yeah, it's not owned by the government.
Yeah.
So it's independent and it's privately held. It works.
But not just that, they've actually done a fantastic job, especially during this period, because without them, I think the rand should have hit 100 or so. But they've done
What
actually
do you
a
mean
fantastic
without them?
job.
They're the ones that printed the money that moved the rand.
No, you've got structural problems. So South African problems are not monetary. South Africa's problems are the actual fiscus, that they're overspending and the revenues are not kept up. They have been spending on a dole, I don't know what they call it in South Africa, where they give up
the
money.
grant.
A grant, they give up money. There are more people who get a grant than there are who are employed. So those are real structural problems where I agree with him that actually South Africa is a perfect example where if you free up the economy, because the ingredients are there, they could do very well
It could
But
easily be
unfortunately-
a $1 trillion economy.
or more. But unfortunately, and this is where I tend to agree with George, because their mentality, the ANC mentality, is very socialist. I don't know why you think that they are middle of the road. They're actually very socialist.
No, they
Because you can't explain why at this point in South Africa, why you're relying on ESCOM, where even if they sort out the ESCOM problems, they will not have enough energy for the next decade or 2 decades. And somebody provides an alternative, which is just license private producers and they refuse.
No, but they have licensed private producers. Eskom's given up land for people to come and produce solar on Eskom's land.
No, feeding into
Eskom.
national-
So because
No.
because the prices, Eskom's prices, the
Not viable.
cabinet has to sign off on those prices. They don't have a free market for electricity. I mean, okay, to put it into proper perspective, in a sophisticated market like the US, the price of electricity fluctuates during the day, right? There's a market, people are constantly bidding for electricity, and there are people who are putting offers for electricity. And when the price,
No, but in fairness, this is not at consumer level. This is at utility level. In a market, even all over Europe, they have government regulators for the price of electricity. Yes, they might liberalize, and there'll be several.
There are many
providers.
producers in Europe. There are many producers.
There are many producers, but
and it's viable. The problem we have in South Africa and in Africa is the minute you start producing excess electricity, there's a cap, there's a price control at some point, and that's the problem that we have. Because you know what, you still need the regulator. You still need the grid. So, for example, in Zimbabwe, if it's ZESA, and that's what I would suggest, is they should just own the grid, and anyone should be able to produce electricity, and they just distribute. They're just a pure distributor of electricity. What it will actually do is then they can, go wild, and rural electrification can actually happen in a massive way, because then they're just purely a distributor. The producers of electricity will just produce it, and then they just get their margin, and it's distributed to everybody.
look,
who wants
and
it.
I think it's a fallacy, this idea that infrastructure is public is a concern for government. I actually believe that the world or any country is much better served if it lets the private sector solve infrastructure problems. For example, if you think about, even in a Zimbabwean context, the Beitbridge Chirundu project, right? If it makes sense, right, to dualize it and have rail or 4, 5, 6 lanes, whatever it is, right? It should, a private investor should be able to look at it and say, if I build this out and I am collecting a toll of X amount, this project makes sense. I like the return on this, and they'll build it out. I don't think that any government is in a good position to actually make an assessment, from an infrastructure standpoint, to say it's actually necessary for this particular highway to be dualized or to be in this condition or that condition. The market would be much, much better at figuring that out. And if they make mistakes, so if somebody thinks it's a great idea to have 4 lanes between Beitbridge and Chirundu, and they put up the capital and they've got it horribly wrong, well, who loses money? It's the shareholders in that project. It's not
The losses are
Zimbabwean
privatized.
Yeah, it's not the taxpayer. Whereas if we as a country use taxpayer money on some project and it turns out not to produce the outcomes that we were hoping for, then we actually come short.
An anecdote, a funny one, is whenever I speak to government officials or government, and this is right across Africa, if you ask them, what if it doesn't work? So they're always full of this big grandiose ideas, right? We should do this, we should do this. And you ask them, okay, so what happens if it fails? Like, who's gonna
pick up
the tab? You know what surprises me? Is that they're surprised at that question.
Because it never occurs to them.
It never occurs to them that actually an infrastructure or whatever can actually fail. It never occurs to them.
So, my original question, what does it mean to us that South Africa is going through this? And what should we be doing?
I think that the biggest problem that we have is we had South Africa taking a lot of our people. So if they're not taking a lot of our people, we have to get our stuff right.
We have to put our house in order.
We have to put our house in order.
Because
now more than ever.
Our industry relies on raw materials coming from there. If they're having energy problems, those supplies are going to be intermittent. And almost guaranteed they'll supply their own industry before exporting. They're not going to create jobs.
But if we're being totally honest, South Africa was just a hub. It's not like the production was actually happening in South Africa. Production is actually happening in China. But for a lot of reasons that have to do with our monetary policy, a lot of people would rather set up their structures in South Africa, right? And goods just pass through South Africa. Because whatever has happened in South Africa, it turns out that monetary policy has actually been good. At least you know that your money is safe.
You know
It
what
might
a
lose
rand
value.
means.
Yes, exactly. So to be fair, if we get our house in order, then South Africa just becomes a kundit, just a transport link, like Mozambique or wherever. But the financing can actually happen in Zimbabwe.
Okay. Jobs. So we will have a social welfare problem, right? We'll have a lot of people.
Yeah, we need to create
We'll
the
have a lot of
jobs.
people coming home and looking for jobs, and we'll have a lot of teenagers coming into the job market.
I agree. We need to be, so our laws need to be investment attractive for new investment. And we need huge investment that can actually create the jobs. And unfortunately, and I always say this, so let me give you an example. Nigerian ICT contributes about 18% of that.
Yes, you love making this, using this
You know,
example.
and oil, it's like 6%, right? And in Zim, we're making the reverse problem, where we keep hammering and focusing on minerals and agriculture, which it turns out that's not where we can potentially employ a lot more people. We can actually employ a lot more people in these new industries, you know, BPOs. That's a huge market if you think about it, and we can employ a whole lot more people.
Yeah, so I'm going to make a different case, which is, you know, one of the reasons why South Africa is in this conundrum is because of populism, which has created in a big percentage of the electorate this sense of entitlement. I must get cheap electricity. I must get a government handout to help with my subsistence. If I am employed, it must be almost impossible for me to get fired without stealing or doing something really egregious. And this attitude is pervasive. And so to some extent, I actually have some empathy for the politicians there, because it's in an environment in which you have such a sense of entitlement, it's very difficult to make reform. Now, if I pivot to Zimbabwe, if you look at where we were, say, 2008 going into 2009, right? You had most people in formal employment, certainly those working for government. They were at a point in 2008 where they were earning less than $1 a month. So we cross over into 2009 and dollarization.
Less than $1 a month.
Yeah, if you worked out what their Zim dollar earnings
But-
income was,
Okay. I don't think this is material to your point. Carry on.
right? We were paying them $100 a month initially. We said, look, this is because we don't have capacity to pay more than $100. And our civil service, for the most part, was incredibly grateful to make that transition from 2008 to 2009, where they were earning only $100, right? And today we're talking about strikes and problems where, you know, you have a civil servant that believes they're good for $500 a month, you know. But I think, notwithstanding this problem, you know, some of this entitlement that's here in Zim, people are used to not having electricity. So if it's available all the time but expensive, it's, you know, something that, you know, mentally and emotionally, most people can accept. So we can actually make a lot of the reforms here that are difficult for the South Africans to make without worrying about a massive blowback from, you know, from the public. Because, you know, you don't have running water, you don't have electricity, you can't access cash, you have all these severe problems. So if somebody says, hey,
But our politicians don't believe in the free market. They don't believe in business.
so this is the opportunity that's there for us to make the case that, look, South Africa
But
is
how do you
stalling.
change their mindset? Because it's really the mindset. See, if tomorrow the mindset, the government mindset, just changes, where they're like, you know what, we shouldn't be in business. We were not voted to be in business. Zimbabwe will change overnight.
Yeah, and I think this is the case that we ought to be making, to say that
We've been making the case since 1980. Why do you think that
Well,
this time around would be any
I think
different?
the alternative is just to give up, right?
Is that an acceptable alternative?
No, it's not.
And maybe this is a good place to end the show before we stray into matters that we know even less about than things that we don't know anything about. It's been lovely having you along. It's great to be back.
Please tell us you're traveling again soon.
No, I can't leave you. I'm not going to leave you guys alone ever again. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe. Be good. If you can't be good at it.